Order, order. Good afternoon and welcome to the Secretary of State for Wales, Joe Stevens, and the Under-Secretary of State, Dame Griffith. Lovely to see you both, and thank you so much for taking the time to come here this afternoon. And obviously welcome to all those interested members in the public gallery. It's good to see you all. My name is Ruth Jones. I'm the Chair of the Welsh Affairs Select Committee. And we are joined today, as I said, by Joe Stevens and Dame Griffith. From the Wales office, which we are great to have them here. It's the first time they've appeared in front of the new committee in their they're very official, established roles now, so thank you very much for that. As a member of the previous committee, we did enjoy a very positive relationship with the previous Secretary of State, and we do hope that this is going to continue into this Parliament as well. I'm sure it will. We have a great deal to get through, a lot of keen people on the committee, and we know we only have an hour, so I am going to make a request for very succinct questions and very succinct answers, if that's okay. Members will now declare any interest that they may have relevant to today's session. Anne?
I think I should declare that I'm a dairy farmer in West Wales. We've got 250 acres as APR, and BPR is part of the questioning that we've got. So I'd like to declare that interest, please.
Thank you very much. And also I should declare my husband is an employee of Arcadis, which is a civil engineering structural firm which works for HS2. So I should declare that. Andrew?
I'll just declare that I'm the chair of the newly formed Growth Track 360 group as well.
We've all bared our souls now. I'm going to ask the Secretary of State, I know you'd like to make a short statement at the beginning, so that would be great if you go ahead now, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations to everyone on your membership of this committee, and thank you for the invitation to appear today. And I echo your sentiments, Chair, about hoping to have a very constructive relationship with the committee whilst we're in office. Thank you for letting me set out my priorities for the Wales office by way of a statement at the beginning. It's a real honour to be the first female Labour Secretary of State for Wales and begin delivering the change that people in Wales voted for 6 months ago. A lot has been done, but there is still a lot more to do. So my priorities include, so not restricted to this, but include, and I think these are the three most important, obviously economic growth, bringing inward investment and infrastructure investment like rail, for example, creating well-paid, secure jobs so we can raise people's living standards. Secondly, protecting and defending our steel communities and unleashing what I consider to be Wales's huge potential in the green industries of the future. And thirdly, resetting the relationship with Welsh Government so that we've got a true working partnership based on mutual trust and respect that benefits everyone across Wales. And those three priorities are obviously all grounded in the government's number one mission to deliver economic growth through our plan for change. The last 6 months have seen more than £1 billion of investment committed to Wales and hundreds of jobs at Erin Holdings in Shotton Mill and Kellogg's in Wrexham. The ground's also been laid for thousands more jobs in advanced manufacturing, clean industries and growth sectors. And going forward, I'm obviously working with Welsh Government, the Crown Estate and other partners to ensure that we maximise those opportunities that I mentioned in the Celtic Sea from floating offshore wind, which will deliver those well-paid jobs and a brand new, thriving green industry in Wales. I'm working with Cabinet colleagues, Welsh Government, businesses, trade unions and universities to ensure that we have a powerful Welsh story right at the heart of the UK modern industrial strategy and the forthcoming steel strategy. And I want to see those new investments, jobs and businesses with the benefits passed on and felt by people across Wales. I would mention, I'm sure we'll talk about it, the situation in Port Talbot, and that has been a very big focus of mine since our first day in government, taking the transition board from discussion through to delivery in just 6 months, with £80 million of support that had previously been promised but was unfunded by the previous government. So over £40 million, just over £42 million has been announced to support workers and the supply chain, allowing businesses to pivot, diversify and adapt as part of the transition from the way we've made steel in the past to the way we're going to make steel in the future. The government's first budget delivered the biggest real terms settlement for Wales since the dawn of devolution, with £1.7 billion more to invest in public services in Wales. And my main focus going into the spending review this year is to ensure that Wales receives its fair share of funding so that we tackle the historic underinvestment in rail infrastructure that has been the hallmark of the last 14 years. And finally, Chair, since the election, Nia and I have led the charge across government to fundamentally reset the relationship between UK government and Welsh government. Working together, we can finally get on with delivering for the people of Wales.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. And you mentioned there about resetting the relationship with Welsh Government. And I suppose the first question would be, given that you've also said you wanted to go further and faster in strengthening the voice and the impact of the Wales Office across government, has the reduction, say, in the number of MPs, we've gone from 40 MPs to 32, has that impacted on the ability to have a voice for Wales? And are you sufficiently resourced to actually deliver?
Well, I would say on the reduction of Welsh MPs, something my mum always used to say to me, which is it's quality, not quantity. We have a large intake of very enthusiastic and talented MPs in Wales, as well as more seasoned ones like ourselves, some of us around this room. But I know that every single colleague in this room will be powerful advocates for their constituents. Absolutely no doubt about that. And I think in terms of the voice of Wales in Parliament and in government, obviously 27 of the 32 Welsh MPs are in the governing party. I think we have 30% of our MPs are ministers in government, so that's a big, powerful voice right across government. And it doesn't just demonstrate, I think, the talent across all parties in Wales, but it creates a powerful and effective voice inside government for the people of Wales. Around the Cabinet table, I hope, and I think I have been a strong voice for Wales if I look at what we have delivered as a team since July. And in terms of resourcing, obviously we have the spending review coming up. I hope the committee will forgive me for not having a conversation that I should probably first have with the Chancellor ahead of that. But what I would say is I ran a business before I was elected as a Member of Parliament, so I've come at it from a perspective and experience of looking at efficiencies and how you run an organisation. And I think the Wales Office Director and the team in the Wales Office run a very efficient department. That's not to say at peaks of work, it can get quite stressful, I'm sure. But like any organisation, you have peaks and then you have downturns. And everything I have asked of the Wales Office to date has been delivered well. So I'm very happy with it, but obviously we'll be having conversations as part of the spending review. And in terms of our relationship with Welsh Government, I think that has been very close, very productive, and I think we've seen that in terms of what's been delivered over the last 6 months.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand you over to Jill German now, please.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the committee. So I want to ask a little bit more about resetting this relationship with Welsh Government, and I was really pleased to hear that that was one of your 3 key priorities at the beginning of the session. So we've heard that you said when you were appointed that you wanted to reset that relationship. So 2 parts to my question, really. What did you find the relationship was like when you took office? So the baseline, if you like, and then how does resetting that relationship in the onward journey, how will that look in practice in your opinion?
So I suppose we're a small nation, and the political groupings within Wales, pretty much everybody knows each other, both within their own parties and cross-party. So I suppose the good thing is that you've got relationships in place already. And obviously we had done a lot of preparation for government as part of the run-up into the general election campaign. And I think, and I hope that we did it thoroughly, because other than the black hole that was discovered in Treasury, nothing has come as a surprise going into the role. I have been very proactive, as have colleagues right across Welsh Government, as has Nia, in terms of liaison and discussion and working in partnership with colleagues in Welsh Government, and I've seen that across Cabinet colleagues as well. So there is a real drive to make sure that things work in a better way. We know under previous governments it's been a difficult relationship, and we wanted to reset that. And I think the Prime Minister has led from the front. He came to Wales within, I think, 48 hours. 72 hours of us winning the election. He's been to Wales 3 times. We've had the Council of Nations and Regions meeting. So there is a real reset. And if you listen to what Welsh Government ministers say And what the First Minister says, they consider the relationship to have been transformed. And that's good enough for me.
Thank you. And you've already touched on the Council of Nations and Regions, and I wanted to ask about the three-tier system of intergovernment relationships that was set up in 2022. So a two-part question again. Do you feel that that's sufficient to ensure the effective working that we need in this new era? And also, what do you see the role of the Council of Nations and Regions plays in policy making in Wales and how it can be improved?
So on the intergovernmental relations structures, those three tiers that you've mentioned, clearly in the past few years we've not seen the engagement and the activity that one would have expected between the two governments through all levels of that structure. I think it differed level to level. And certainly we didn't have the engagement between Prime Ministers and First Ministers of devolved governments that has been put in place since we came into government. So you can have all the structures you want, but if you don't have the will in order to deliver that engagement and go and approach it in a way that is a true collaboration, then there's no point having the structures. I'm very happy in the way in which they're working. And on Council and Nations and Regions, you mentioned about policy making, I think was your question.
Yeah, so as with that in existence, I suppose it's what improvements will it make to those intergovernment relationships and the fact that we're all pulling in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, the role of the Council, which obviously the Prime Minister chairs, is to facilitate that partnership working. So between UK government, devolved governments, and the various categories of mayors in England. It won't make policy directly for Wales, but it does provide a really important vehicle for governments and authorities with devolved responsibilities to work together on sharing good practice and delivering on people's priorities across all parts of the United Kingdom. And we know, if we look at around the UK, there are shared challenges. And in order to find solutions, it's obviously helpful to look at shared solutions as well. And this, the Council is a good vehicle for that. I think in the October meeting, the Council talked about the modern industrial strategy and opportunities for attracting inward investment. And the members of the Council have committed to working together in order to leverage the maximum investment we can into all of our nations and regions because we want to see the support across the whole of the UK for economic growth.
Yeah, that's great strategy. Thank you.
I'm going to move on now to David Chadwick, please.
Thank you, Chair. So in September, the Welsh Secretary announced plans for Welsh patients to receive treatment across England in an effort to drive down waiting lists in Wales, which are now the highest on record. Those plans were seemingly then walked back by Welsh Government ministers. Now in Paris, the Health Board has been forced into a position by the Welsh Government where it could force Welsh patients to wait longer than English patients when being treated at the same hospital. This is in direct contradiction to what the Department has previously outlined. So will this government allow Welsh patients to receive treatment in England to drive down waiting lists or not? And if so, when can we expect to see any movement on this issue?
Well, I think David, look, the point is that we want to work very closely with Welsh Government on this issue, and initially it is very much about looking at best practice on both sides of the border and what are the lessons that we can learn. But in practical terms on the ground, he will know that there are already agreements in existence whereby because of the geography of a place, it's more appropriate for patients to go to one side or the other side to a GP, and where there are specialist provisions that again cross-border working has been common. As he quite rightly points out, there is absolutely the case for exploring this further and for ensuring that there are no discrepancies, as he describes, between what can be accessed on one side of the border and the other side of the border by patients who are attending the same GP surgery.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Steve Witherden, who's going to follow on the healthcare questioning.
Thank you, Chair.
And then Henry Tufnell.
And following on from that question just then, my constituency straddles two health boards, Betsy Cadwallader and Powys Teaching Health Board, and some border health boards have their own large hospitals, but Powys Teaching Health Board does not, and patients are totally dependent on Shropshire hospitals for multiple procedures. With that in mind, will you work with Senedd colleagues to look at extra support for Powys Teaching Health Board?
Well, I think, as I've just outlined, that very close working is absolutely crucial to all of this, and we will need to obviously look at specific cases that he raises. But I think the principle of being much more open to working collaboratively, to looking at what works and what isn't working, and to be prepared to make changes. There are two very important factors here. One is that in the budget in October 2024, we absolutely ensured that there was money available to be used for health, which clearly in England that is already going ahead. As far as Wales is concerned, it enabled us to give that 1.7 billion uplift to Welsh Government, the best settlement ever since devolution. And as you will know from what you've heard from the First Minister's priorities over the summer, plus the huge tranches of money that Welsh Government has already allocated to the health service, and the money that is being put aside in the Welsh Government's budget, which I hope that all members will encourage their colleagues in the Senedd to support in order to facilitate improving the services for all, and that will obviously include Powys and Betsy Cadwallader.
Thank you, Steve. Henry Tufnell, please.
I just wondered if you could expand a bit more on the engagement you expect to see between both governments following on from the announcement in September in terms of those partnerships between Welsh and UK government and that interaction between the health boards and the trust, and what that engagement looks like.
So are you talking about engagement between specific health boards and trusts in England? Or what
in terms of a cross-border perspective. So we talked about it in terms of the agreement within the new partnership. It'll be work in the Secretary of State announced in September, be the ambition for this new partnership, drive down NHS waiting lists on both sides of the border. And I wanted to ask what that looked like in terms of the engagement with the trusts in respect of England, and then also the health boards.
Right. Well, I think the important thing here is to remember, obviously, ultimate responsibility for the health service in Wales does lie with Welsh Government ministers, but in terms of day-to-day operational matters, ministers don't micromanage. So clearly what we want is to have the best possible treatment nearest to home, whether that is by having more services available in GP and community services, more services available locally, and where that's not possible, having those agreements which are already in place in Wales for specialist treatment in different health board areas, and with the mechanism that there is for requesting that specialist treatment be carried out in England.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the responsibility for implementation lies with the health board or the trust. And for instance, Welsh Government invested £3.4 million in training more radiologists. So in terms of driving down those waiting times. But there's been a report by Welsh Audit that found that some NHS bodies have been unable to create the jobs needed or take on these newly qualified specialists. So the question is, how will this new innovative partnership improve the scrutiny and delivery of these health boards and NHS trusts?
Okay. Well, I think there are two parts to that. The first of all is the part which is clearly Welsh Government and Welsh Government ministers' responsibility. But don't forget, we have also now set up this ministerial advisory group, which is there specifically to look at the ways that we can progress. And as I've just mentioned, what we're very open to is what is best practice everywhere, what reforms actually are needed and work, as well as the funding. We recognise both in the UK government and in Welsh Government that it's about not just funding but also about reform and about looking at what actually works in terms of delivery.
Thank you very much. And I think Simon Hall has a short supplementary.
My heart always sinks when I hear about a ministerial advisory group. It's a bit like a royal commission. Often takes a lot of time. It doesn't actually achieve anything. But the Secretary of State set out in her priorities the growth of high-quality jobs and a dynamic economy. Are you convinced and persuaded that Welsh Government ministers make the link between a healthy workforce, growing Wales PLC, and the dynamic that plays in the economy when they set their health strategies? Because I remain to be convinced that that's necessarily fully grasped.
Well, to be fair, Chair, Simon, you do quite surprise me on this, because Wales has been in the lead in terms of preventive medicine and looking at things like early years in education and looking at preventive matters in medicine. And of course we do have a legacy, as he will know, from the industrial past that we have. But look at the investment that there has been, first of all, in getting the Swansea Medical School up and running, and now the Bangor Medical School up and running, looking very carefully at how we can encourage more trainees to come over to Wales, maintaining the nurses' bursary when it was cut in England. All ways in which we're looking at globally, in the round, trying to make things better in terms of health in Wales, and very much, I think, looking at the strategy that it's not just about what happens in the health service, as he says.
I take that, sorry, Chair, and the data sometimes points in a destination not intended by those strategies in many respects. And yet, notwithstanding all that you have said, Wales has incredibly long and arguably unsustainable waiting lists in too many areas of legitimate health demand from people who live there. What is this ministerial advisory group going to do to actually get a grip on that and sort it out in a time frame which a general election promising change would meet the aspirations of those who voted for it?
I think perhaps suggest that the Undersecretary might like to follow up in writing on this, because I'm conscious health is a devolved matter, and we do need to move on. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to come back to David Chadwick. He's going to move on.
Thank you, Chair. What are your priorities for the Port Talbot Tata Steel Transition Board in 2025, and what is your assessment of the short and medium-term economic impact on businesses in Port Talbot as a consequence of the job losses at the Tata plant? And just to say, my grandfather worked at the steelworks and the blast furnaces in the 1960s, and when he did so, he was one of 20,000 colleagues, which is a sign of how many jobs have been lost in that area over the past 50 years.
Yes, it's as we know, we've got a proud steelmaking history in Wales, like we had a proud coal mining history in Wales. I think at one point we had 250,000 miners just across the South Wales pits. But you'll know, David, that when the election was called, in fact, polling day, on polling day, 4th of July, both blast furnaces in Port Talbot were due to shut together, with the loss of every job that would have been associated with it. Within 10 weeks of coming into office, we had, through Jonathan Reynolds, the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, negotiated an improved deal with Tata Steel, which not only secured the future of steelmaking at Port Talbot, secured talks about future investment to increase the amount of steel making through methods other than the electric arc furnace, which we agreed on, safeguarded 5,000 jobs and made sure that as part of that agreement, if Tata don't stick to 5,000 jobs, there will be £40,000 per job returned under the deal. 385 acres of land released for development within the area for regeneration, and working with the trade unions, the best ever voluntary redundancy terms that Tata have ever offered in the United Kingdom to their workforce. So we had a very short period of time in which to do some critical work, and I believe that we delivered the best deal that we could in that period. Now, since then, as you know, I chair the Transition Board, which is made up of local politicians from all parties, with representatives from the council and senior management from Tata. That board had been in existence for 9 months at the time of the election, and no money had gone out to support workers either directly at Tata or in the supply chain. I moved that board from discussion to delivery, and in the summer got £13.5 million announced specifically to help the supply chain, because we could see that because of the uncertainty there were jobs already being lost in the supply chain. The £80 million that had been promised by the previous government turned out to be unfunded. The money was not there. The pots it could have come from, there were 3 pots, had all been spent, which was why I fought tooth and nail leading up to the budget in October to secure that £80 million that had been promised to people in Port Talbot. And so far, we have announced £42 million through 3 specific tranches of funding, and there will be more coming up in order to help individuals, businesses, direct employees and people in the supply chain. So that's to help people find new jobs, to retrain, reskill, businesses to diversify and adapt, and people to set up their own businesses. We've seen people who have left the steelworks already setting up their own businesses. And as we come into this sort of critical peak period now at the start of this year when the voluntary redundancies will take effect, we will see more and more demand on those funds. And what I would say is, if any of you are in Port Talbot at all over the next few months, the Community Union has established a hub in Aberavon Shopping Centre where we have all the support services available with Welsh Government, Business Wales, local authority, third sector organisations. They have had, since they set up, and I think it's only, my officials will correct me, I think it's about 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Yeah. They've had over 1,400 people through the door to provide support and advice to. So there's, I kind of look at it as we have wrapped our arms around Port Talbot and our steel communities, and I'm determined that we're going to get through this very difficult period and then build on the opportunities for Port Talbot in the future, particularly around the free port and floating offshore wind.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Anne Davies, please.
Diolch. The Treasury says that small family farms won't be affected by the changes to the APR and the BPR. And the FUW, the Farmers Union of Wales, of which I'm the chairman in Carmarthenshire, perhaps I should have declared that as well, contending evidence submitted to this committee that the calculation includes small holdings, which distorts the picture on the impact of working farms. Taking small holdings out of the data, it shows that 93 to 100% of farms which produce 89% of agricultural output in Wales will be liable or could be liable for inheritance tax. Given the evidence submitted by the farming unions, by NFU and by FUW, can you tell us why no Welsh specific impact assessment has been made of the changes of APR and BPR?
Well, thank you very much indeed. And if I can just put on record to start with the fact that we are talking here about parents being able to pass on at least £3 million to their immediate family members in terms of their agricultural holding, and that after that, of course, they're then still eligible for only paying at half the rate of the normal tax, and that they can have over 10 years to pay that. But in respect of the actual figures that she mentions, the Treasury figures, which are robust and the Treasury is quite confident in them, they see a potential of potentially 500 cases across the whole of the UK, of which obviously only a very small number would actually be in Wales, that are affected by this. And as they have done the records up to date in paper form, they don't actually as yet have a segregated number for Wales specifically, but with the progress of digitisation, they would be looking to be able to facilitate that more easily in the future.
Oh, sorry,
you do a follow-up. Anne's going to follow up with a supplementary.
There's a number of dependents there, isn't there? It depends on whether the family, the mother and father are married. It depends if there are children. In these days, there are issues here which are way beyond that. We've got cousins that farm together, we've got brothers that farm together, we've got people who are not married and don't have children. You know, so the 3 million is a bit of a, I feel, is a bit of a smoke screen really, because there are a number of issues that you need to pass, or a number of hurdles you need to get over before you get to that 3 million. Bottom line is, the Chancellor said £1 million in the budget, and that's the figure that you base it on, and then you move on if you tick all the boxes. You know, there's no need to answer, but that's my comment.
Okay, I'm going to move on then, because I'm going to move on to Claire Hughes from Freeport. Yeah. Claire.
Sorry, Chair. I thought Kenos was coming with a follow-up. Sorry. So thank you, Secretary of State, for joining us. You rightly set out in your opening statement about the importance of economic growth, that being the number one priority for this government. In terms of the two Freeports, the Celtic Freeport and the Holyhead Freeport in North Wales, could you just talk a little bit and explain to us how you will measure in terms of what they are delivering, in terms of the economic growth that we want to see, what specific, like how will you evaluate what they're actually delivering?
Well, obviously we've confirmed the Freeport programme in the autumn statement. I'm very pleased that the Celtic Freeport's now open for investment following tax site activation last November. And we're working at pace with MHCLG and the Welsh Government to progress the Anglesey Freeport tax sites, which I'm hoping will activate next week, 23rd of January, subject to Parliamentary and Senedd approval. And once the full business case approval is reached, then the £26 million in UK government funding will be released. In terms of the measures to determine the success of the Freeports, I mean, clearly they are designed and we are implementing them in order to deliver economic growth. So there will be a monitoring evaluation process once they are up and established in all the Welsh locations. That actual evaluation process will be for MHCLG and Welsh Government to determine. But from my point of view, boosting economic growth and creating jobs are the key measurements of success, and that is the rationale behind the Freeports. That's what the prospectus sets out for them to do, and we want to see them promoting regeneration, high quality job creation, being a national hub for our global trade and investment across the economy, and also fostering an innovative environment, because we know in Wales, you know, innovative businesses grow successfully, and the Freeports are going to be the kind of catalyst for more of that.
Thank you. And just very quickly, I know you mentioned the role universities play in your opening statement as well, so I think that clearly that's something for us to take on board.
Definitely, and obviously the citing of Bangor University in North Wales and Cardiff University, Swansea University and others have played in the part in the Celtic Freeport. You know, we've got great universities with great talent in them and need to foster that talent and innovation even more.
Brilliant, thank you.
Enos Medi, please, if you want to follow on with the supplementary and then go on to your full question.
Yeah, just a quick supplementary, and just so that the Freeport board is set up and that the university is a part of the board, because the MSPAC siting is part of the Freeport site, so the university, just for clarity, and the Freeport in Ynys is skills driven as well. We're moving on to Holyhead. Obviously the closure of the port of Holyhead has had a dramatic impact not just on the town of Holyhead and North Wales, and much wider than North Wales. I think we've been trying to promote the importance of the strategic importance of the port of Holyhead in the flow of goods and in growing the economy. We've had a direct impact on the local supply chain, and what we've learnt through this is that there is no mitigation to support those businesses that have been dramatically affected. One business has lost 70% of its footfall. Another hotel has lost 147 nights, which at just £100 a head is 14,700 in addition to that storm damage. My ask, and I think, is that we work together here to make sure that there is a pot of money, a hardship fund put in place, because we're going to see more climate change, we're going to be more storm damage, more impact on the economy, and we should learn lessons to support our supply chain, who are the backbone of rural economy, especially in places that we all represent. We know the small businesses as a majority of the economy in Wales, that we can support these businesses to withstand. I met with one company, she'd only just opened in last February, and she just didn't think she could withstand. I'm aware that the port is hopefully reopening tomorrow, but it's partially reopening. So we need to make sure that there's a support package in place. And this then could be actually for the government to use in future examples where the economy is disturbed in this way. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for your correspondence, Finos, and obviously you've had a reply from me. I mean, obviously share the frustrations and the worries of all those who were affected by the closure, and as you say, very good news. One of the berths will reopen tomorrow. That's been confirmed literally as I was walking into this committee. That will mean that services can start again for people wanting to travel and for businesses transporting goods, and obviously will have a positive impact on the island in terms of supply chain businesses. I think actually, and I do want to thank everybody who's been involved in getting the port partially back up and running, who've done a tremendous job. I think it's been a really good piece of cross-government working, because obviously Welsh Government is primarily responsible for the port. So you've had Welsh Government, you've had UK Government involved, you've had Stena Line as the owners of the port. And it has reinforced the importance of Holyhead, as you say, and the UK Government's £20 million investment in improving the breakwater will mean that the port is better protected in future. Welsh Government have also put £20 million by way of a loan in to help Holyhead in the future. And I met with the Transport Secretary and with the Welsh Government Cabinet Secretary for Transport in North Wales just prior to Christmas, when we were discussing the impact and how we were going to deal with the reopening of the port once it was safe, because obviously safety of passengers and freight and workers is absolutely critical to this. It can't reopen unless it's safe. Now, I do know that Ynys Council are currently conducting a survey across businesses to gather evidence about the impact. So I would encourage, I'm sure you are encouraging all the businesses that you've referred to contribute to that survey, to provide direct evidence about what the impact has been, so that we have a basis of evidence to look at in terms of economic impact. And I would also say, I hope all the businesses are checking their insurance policies, because it may be that there is insurance cover in the event of business interruption. I don't know, because each policy will be individually issued to businesses, but that might also be something else to be advising constituents about.
I'll just come back quickly, with your permission, Chair. The breakwater funding is obviously welcomed, but that's been announced a few years back, and that's more to do with the safeguarding with flooding and the safeguarding the port. But this, obviously, it won't have an impact on the port itself, and the funding that I'm asking was the support for those businesses and a recognition that the supply chain is the backbone of the port of Holyhead, and I just want that to be recognised. And I want to thank the County Council as well for opening the portal, and that the businesses are involved in that. But there are some businesses, as the startup, she has no evidence for this time last year, because she didn't open until February. So there are challenges that those businesses do face. Mm-hmm. But I hope that we can keep this dialogue going, and I also want to congratulate the Irish Government for putting in a hardship fund to support their businesses there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Anne Davis now and make a request for brevity, please.
Thank you. Mine is about green energy. My constituency of Caerfyrddin are expecting 4 different infrastructure lines coming through the county. Tywiasg, Tywi Teifi, North South, and probably the new Celtic Sea from Pembrokeshire, all coming into a proposed new substation in Llandafaelog, which is just on the other side of the border between Dame Nia and myself. 4 different lines of infrastructure, when alternative options such as cable ploughing these lines would result in better outcomes for all our West Wales residents. So can you advise really here when the IAG will be reporting on the cost comparisons between pylons, open cut and cable plough, and hopefully before decisions are made to build this infrastructure?
Chair, if I may just declare an interest that Llandafaelog is actually in my constituency, but I shall refer to the projects in Anne's constituency, if I may. Okay, so UK government recognises the impact that pylons for electricity infrastructure do have on local communities, particularly in rural areas, and the ability to grant the distribution network operator licences is a matter for Ofgem as the independent energy regulator, and UK government does not comment on Ofgem's decision making on licence applications. And as she will know, it's Welsh ministers who decide the planning applications for developments of national significance, and so therefore it would be inappropriate for UK government to comment on the specifics of the planning proposals. Now, Desnes's position on cable ploughing, which I know she's referring to and familiar with, has been informed by evidence from the Institution of Engineering and Technology in 2012, which indicates that the cost of underground cables is around 5 to 10 times more expensive than overhead lines. This evidence indicates that undergrounding generates substantial impact on local communities and habitats. Therefore, the cost borne by electricity bill payers and environmental impacts must be considered when designing network infrastructure. But Desnes have said very clearly that they are open to considering new evidence on the technology. And as she will know, the Welsh Government has recently embarked on an exploration of cable ploughing as an undergrounding solution, and we do look forward to the outcomes of that work.
Can I just come very, very briefly in? I should have declared I'm a chair of a local anti-pylon committee in Llanafri, so I should have declared
helpful,
that.
thank
so
you.
I apologise.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on now to Andrew Ridge, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for being here. Great to see you here. I wanted to ask about rail infrastructure. I noted, Secretary of State, in your opening statement that you mentioned about the historical underfunding of rail infrastructure in Wales, the complex structures around that in terms of separation of track and rolling stock, and the fact that actually it's fair to say that I think people in Wales have been underserved in terms of rail for a long, long time, and linked to what you also said about economic development and investment across the whole of Wales, that rail infrastructure is going to be key to help deliver that, both within Wales but also cross-border, linking all the way from the likes of Holyhead all the way across into Manchester, Cheshire in terms of my area, but also in the south as well and in the middle of the country. So could you tell me what your assessment of the state of the rail network is in Wales and what the government's priorities are for the enhancement of the Wales infrastructure?
Well, I'll be perfectly frank on the first part of your question, which is that it's not good enough. And that is a direct consequence, I'm afraid, of the last 14 years of underfunding by prior governments. And that is why I am determined to change that. I can't change the past, but I hope I can change the future. Now, I mentioned in my opening statement a priority, the top priority this year as we go into the spending review is to seek to reverse the years of historic underfunding in infrastructure. I have been working very closely with the Welsh Government Cabinet Secretary for Transport in North Wales, Ken Skates, and with Louise Haigh, the prior Secretary of State for Transport, and Heidi Alexander, now the current Secretary of State for Transport. And we have agreed a direction of travel, if I can put it like that, which I hope will deliver new rail investment for Wales. So we are essentially aligned on 3 key points. The first is the recognition by both governments that Wales has not received its fair share of rail funding in the past. Secondly, that the North Wales and the South East Wales Transport Commissions, so the Burns Commissions, as we all know them as, and the Union Connectivity Review, are able to provide us with a really good blueprint for investment, because it's based on evidence, based on the criteria for rail reform, which is part of the government's programme. And the third point is that we want to work together, so Welsh Government and UK Government, to ensure that we begin to remedy this through this year's spending review. Now, I want to be very clear that we cannot fix this overnight. It has gone on for a long time, and the legacy of underinvestment is going to take time to resolve. But I am clear, both governments are clear, that we've got to break this cycle of underinvestment that had been a political strategy. And I just want to pay tribute actually to this committee as a institution, because it was this committee in 2021 that recommended the establishment of the Wales Rail Board. And Chair, you will have seen the correspondence between the two governments, which I think has possibly been shared with the committee today. And in it, we have been pleased to see the work of the board, the progress that it's made, and we want to see a sort of permanent and enhanced role for that board in the future. So we have asked, in fact, the Wales Rail Board to give advice to the Department for Transport about longer-term arrangements, advice about how we might look at transfer of some rail network enhancement pipeline governance functions from Department for Transport to the Wales Rail Board in future. So the priority projects that the Wales Rail Board have put together as a result of the work they've been doing, that collaboration in the areas that I've talked about, the Burns Commissions and what I still call it the Liverpool-Bidston line. I know it's called Borderlands now. But that is going to inform the work, the DFT work with Treasury in the run-up to the spending review. Because what I want to see is a realistic start to a sustainable pot of rail infrastructure funding for Wales. That's what we need. That's what I'm going to fight for. That's what I am pleased to say we have agreement across the Department for Transport, the Wales Office, Welsh Government, as that submission to go into the discussions on the spending review.
Right, thank you. That's really good to hear. If I may just a little bit extra on this. So, yeah, I'm really pleased in some of the discussions I've been having, particularly in North East Wales, North West England and North Wales. There's some fantastic cooperation work already going on. And what you've said, will hopefully build on that and bring that more together, because it is absolutely vital, and it's really pleasing to see that cooperation that's happening. Because, as I said, those links are vital across the whole of North Wales, the economy. It was good news as well about the North Wales main line in terms of getting the extra capacity on there and the extra speed on there, which again is much, much needed. And the talk about the metros in both South and North Wales as well. So adding on to that, I suppose you might not be able to answer this in terms of the spending review, but do you think that we have got adequate funding for rail in Wales?
Well, we haven't had.
Yeah.
I want us to, and I can't obviously, preempt the spending review, but I am going into the spending review with rail as the number one priority for Wales, because we all know that building rail infrastructure drives economic growth, it drives job creation, it drives house building, it drives employment and improved social cohesion, because people have got public transport to be able to get to the jobs. Employers can find people to come and work in their businesses. It's like a no-brainer, isn't it, really? So subject to business cases being completed, that pipeline of investment that is set out in the board's list of priorities, that is what we will go forward with into our discussions in the spending review. Yeah,
great. And you're absolutely right. In Wrexham, we've obviously got the enterprise zone and the town fund, and actually we need to be able to spread those benefits down the coast. And also the visitor economy linked into Manchester and Liverpool and places like that to actually get those people down into Wales as well and link it all together much better.
Know how important that, both South Wales cross-border, that line is, and North Wales in terms of people living, working, socialising, right across the border all day, every day. And it's, it's a huge channel for economic growth on both sides of the borders, at both the bottom and the top of Wales.
Yeah, and into Ireland as well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Ben Lake now.
Thank you, Chair. Can I begin by just welcoming the Secretary of State's acknowledgement of the historic underfunding, because it, as she rightly referred to, is a topic that the predecessor committee of ours has looked into, and it is refreshing to have that acknowledgement now that there has been that historic underfunding. Another thing that the Secretary of State will know this committee has looked at in the past is the whole matter of HS2 classification. And with what she's just said about ensuring that there is more funding for rail in Wales, would you not agree that reclassifying HS2 as an England-only project would unlock a lot of that extra funding that could help progress some of the schemes that she mentioned and indeed go further?
Well, as I said earlier, I want us to have a sustainable pot of rail infrastructure funding for Wales. And I think we need to stop deriving the future of rail in Wales from HS2 alone. What's gone on in the past, I can't change what's gone on in the past, but I can change what happens in the future. We need sustainable funding of our own. That's what I'm aiming for. And that is what both governments are working towards with that list of priority investments from the Wales Rail Board. I want to see investment into rail in Wales. That's what I'm going to fight for. That's what I want to get. And it's what people in Wales want. They want to look to the future. They want to see stations being built. They want improvements in services. They want to be able to get to see family. They want to get to jobs. And I want to see that pot of sustainable long-term funding in Wales so that we can start to deliver for passengers right across the country in a way that we have not been able to in previous years.
I take what the Secretary of State is saying. Of course, the classification of HS2 as an England and Wales project does have long-term consequences. As far as the statement of funding policy, the Treasury is concerned, it does have an added weighting, and the comparability factor for DFT spending now, including rail, for Wales, does have an impact, and sadly a negative impact, because of HS2's classification. So looking to the future, does she think there is a case of, very nicely, requesting the Treasury to look again at this, even if it is the case that they only apply it to future spending on HS2? Because at the moment, estimates are, I think, up to £80 billion worth now for HS2. There's a real risk that because of its classification, it'll squeeze Wales' ability to get rail funding.
For the sake of repeating myself, I don't think we should derive our future based solely on what has happened with HS2 in the past.
No, I appreciate that, and that's not what I'm trying to say. Forgive me. No, I'm saying that
phase one is being completed. The latest Welsh Government estimate of the money that's been spent would have, had it been classified differently, attracted a consequential of £350 million. There are lots of figures that have been talked about over previous years, but what we do know is that only phase one of HS2 is being built. Phase 2 has been abandoned by the last government. It's not going to happen. So I think, what I can say to you, Ben, is what we do agree on is that there's been historic underfunding of rail infrastructure in Wales. And that's very clear in what I've said today, and it's very clear in the exchange of letters between the Transport Secretary and myself with Welsh Government. And that's why I'm going to do something about it. So, as I say, I can't change the past. I will absolutely be trying to change the future.
Thank you very much for that. And we do thank you for the sight of the correspondence between yourself, Heidi Alexander, and the Welsh Government, Ken Skates. It's really helpful. We will publish that later on this week. And you've talked about the ambitions for the future. And what's done is done. And the agreement on the way forward is there in principle. And I suppose we know the Burns Commission was established in 2019 and the Hendy Review was established shortly after that. We know where we've been. It's a timeline and funding. And can you give us any indication in terms of timeline and funding in order for people of Wales to know that, the Secretary of State is on their side?
Well, the Secretary of State is definitely on their side. I hope that's evident from what I've said today and the exchange of letters. I can't preempt what the spending review will do, but I have indicated, and we've set out what the priority projects are. We are obviously committed to the current projects, so there are a number of projects already underway and they will continue. But as soon as we're in a position to say, we will do. But I just want the committee to be reassured that this is my top on my shopping list for the spending review. And I will work across government and have been working across government and with Welsh Government to make sure that we get what we need and what is a fair pot of sustainable funding for the future.
Thank you very much, and we wait to see the results of the fight over Cabinet. And Simon Hoare has been waiting very patiently for the final question here.
Thank you, Chair. Secretary of State, lovely to see you. It's good news, of course, that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for 2025-26, the additional year, has been confirmed by the government. Secretary of State, what is your view of the purpose of the Shared Prosperity Fund and its future?
Well, it's been very important in Wales, very significant, and it is important for the future too. In terms of what will happen, as you say, we have sorted out what's going to happen for 25-26, and that was as a result of discussions between MHCLG, the Wales office, and colleagues in Welsh Government, and we were able to protect the percentage share of those funds for Wales. In terms of what's going to happen in the future, we're in discussions at the moment about how that will work and the mechanisms around that. But what I would like to see is streamlining so that we have less bureaucracy involved. I would like us to obviously learn from the funds in the past, what has worked well, and learn the lessons of that, but also learn the lessons of what might not have worked as well, so that we don't replicate that in the future. But in terms of what it means for Wales, it's very significant, it's very important. If you go into any community in Wales, you'll see what it has delivered. So we want to see more of that in the future.
Well, thank you for that. When you set out in your opening remarks earlier this afternoon, your priorities, the one thing you didn't, either by accident or by design, I'm not going to comment upon, was the role of or your view about the role of the position of Secretary of State as the voice of strengthening the Union, the United Kingdom. As a unionist, I think that's an important element of the role of Secretary of State, so I'd welcome your just observation on that. And given the fact that it's called currently the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, the whole underpinning of that is that it's the prosperity of the four nations of the United Kingdom adding to the prosperity of each other. Do you see it going forward as being important that your office effectively runs the show when it comes to the fund, and that it should be used and seen as a very tangible advert for the benefit of maintaining and strengthening the Union of the United Kingdom?
Okay, so to deal with your first point, it wasn't a deliberate omission from my opening statement, because I did say my priorities include. Yes. It wasn't a definitive list of the priorities. I strongly believe that Wales benefits from being part of the Union, and the Union benefits from having Wales in it. That's always been my view, and I don't think I'll ever change my view on that. So what I want to see is money being spent in Wales, that we have a collaborative approach to how decision making happens. And, for example, in our manifesto, we confirmed that future structural funds, for example, would be decisions around those would be made by the elected representatives of Wales. And, and there is a role for the three tiers of elected representatives in Wales in that: UK government, Welsh government, and local authorities. And I think we make better decisions when we work together, and those better decisions have better outcomes for the people of Wales. But ultimately, it is money that comes from UK government into Wales. How it's badged, people will have different views about that, but I want the money to come in. I want it to be spent effectively, properly, efficiently, value for money, so that we're not wasting taxpayers' money, and we're seeing direct benefits in every community in Wales.
Thank you. My final question, Chair, if I may, which is on the same theme. Given that and that sort of mutuality, and I can understand why the Senedd wouldn't want allocations of the fund made for things which are either going to undermine or different from priorities which they have or it has. But do you think, what is your view towards devolving this funding to the Welsh Government? I think you and I probably share a view of that importance of it as a rather sort of quiet way of underpinning the strength and importance of the Union, and devolving the funding would possibly undermine that.
Well, as I said in our manifesto, we said that decision-making on structural funds will be made by elected representatives of Wales, and there was a change under the previous government where Welsh Government were completely cut out of it. I think Welsh Government has a key role to play in the delivery of new funds alongside other partners, including local authorities, but obviously with a role for the UK Government to play. And that's the approach that I will look at. I would anticipate that arrangements in the future will look similar to arrangements under previous structural funds, but as I say, anybody who has had any experience of this knows that there are efficiencies that can be made, bureaucracy that can be removed, so that we can streamline that funding and it has the maximum impact possible.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to bring this session to a close now. I want to thank the Secretary of State for Wales and the Under-Secretary of State for coming along this afternoon, to giving us their time, and hopefully they've realised that as a committee we do take our job of scrutinising very seriously and holding the Wales office to account. And with that in mind, I wonder if you would be able to give us a commitment that you will come back on a yearly basis to exchange views with the committee.
Very happy to do that, Chair. Thank you for the invitation today. Thank you all on behalf of Nia and I for the questions, and we'll be delighted to come back in 12 months' time.
Thank you very much. In that case, I declare the session closed. Order.